Hi, this is No Ordinary Voice of Spiritual Ventriloquism. You are listening to me himself. Hebrew Canaanite Culture Redo, Part 2. Sorry about that bad video. Tried another one. It didn't do so well. So here we go again. Let's see if we can get it right this time. When Yah called Abraham from Ur of the Chaldees, the oven in Syria, he brought Abraham down into a land that he would show him. Just so happened to be the land of the Canaanites. During that amount of time, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob dwelt and were simulated within the Canaanite culture. It doesn't necessarily mean, that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob came from the Canaanites. It's just that they dwelt in proximity to the Canaanite culture. And which, going back to Abraham's father being an Amorite, his mother a Hittite, is also testifying not to his genetics, but to the culture that Yah, for whatever reason, chose to bring him to and to learn from and to adopt some of their things. Now, it's very uncomfortable to see this proposition because for 1900 years now, Christianity has dominated theology and what ancient Israel was. And very few people since then, except a bunch of modern revisionists, have picked up that ball and ran with it. Bill Deaver probably being the exception. But anyway, I highly recommend his works. But the reason Yah brought Abraham into the Canaanite culture into the land of Canaan and its accompanying culture was that Yah was about ready to displace the Canaanites, and he made that clear in Genesis chapter 15. He said that know of a surety, your seed shall be descendants in a land that is not theirs, which is Egypt proper, even though when the prophecy was given, Abraham was standing in Egyptian territory. Zoar, Sodom, Gomorrah, all those were Egyptian outposts, military outposts at the time. So anyway, he said that I'm going to give this land to you and your descendants. Well, that meant he would have to dispossess the Canaanites. So obviously, there was a reason why. And the reason why was that the Canaanites began to stray away from and whore against Elohim, who had given them at least a basic knowledge and basic requirements of what he expected of them. So therefore, the Amorites being chiefly the representative of the Canaanite tribes in the land, being the largest, when you judge the head, the whole body is judged as well. Though that doesn't necessarily mean that every Canaanite people was under the ban. You can see that later on with tributaries being made between David and the Jebusites and between David and the Tyrrhenian Phoenicians, who were also Canaanite peoples. They were not under the ban. As long as people were willing to convert, intermarriages could occur. When Israel got back, they began a long, slow process of developing their own particular cult of the Canaanite culture that Yah had refined and retooled, I should say, while they were in the wilderness for the 40 years. They began to fulfill the prophecy that was given to Abraham by dispossessing the Canaanite people of their land and filling Israelites in their stead, little by little, measure by measure, lest the land be multiplied against them with wild beasts and whatnot. So anyway, which also it was a very long, slow process, not what the book of Joshua has a tendency to, that they just came in there and just committed all these kinds of genocides. If you want to know about the conflicts between the book of Joshua and the book of Judges, I have a video up. Joshua 11 and Judges chapter 4 also give you a good idea on how the situation really played out. But anyway, to recap what was said, there is a strong relationship. They are at least kissing cousins, the Canaanites and the Hebrews. As far as the Canaanites' feasts, they were precursor to those of Israel. You can see that in the Ugaritic texts and the Amarna letters and things like that. Well, anyway, culturally, the Hebrews were Canaanites, though they developed their own particular culture through the guidance of Yah during that time that they spent in the wilderness, and began to separate themselves and become Kadash from the Canaanites when they re-entered that land and began to take possession of it. But the fact of the matter is that there are many things like the architecture of the temple, which is of Canaanite design. The Hebrews really didn't have any archaeological or engineering prowess for building. They were nomads. They dwelt in tents. They were shepherds and farmers. And they did not really live in aslar masonry or stone huts or anything of that for the most part until late in the monarchy. As a matter of fact, the first time that they dwelt in a fortified city for the most part, other than maybe Hazor or a couple other places, was when David conquered Jebus from the Jebusites and made that his city, his fortification, and brought the Jebusites in tributary to himself. So anyway, on down to the line of Solomon, or to the time of Solomon, when it came time to build the temple, it was built based on a pre-existing Canaanite design, just like the tabernacle in the wilderness was of somewhat Canaanite derivation. And for whatever reason, it may even be uncomfortable, but obviously Yah had given instructions to Canaanites as to what he preferred, what he liked. And that is why you see the similarities and the convergences between the Canaanites and the Hebrews, okay? Especially as far as their temple or tabernacle design, the tripartite design, and the things like that. Yes, there was a precursor to the Feast of Sukkot in Canaanite cult, and it was an agricultural thing. They went out into their fields and kind of camped out in their fields while they harvested. Wasn't the seventh month, but actually the first month prior to the Hebrews going into Egypt, when Yah made the calendar change and flipped it 180 degrees, which is a whole nother subject together. I don't really want to get into that right now. But suffice it to say, there is a strong relationship and convergence of Canaanite culture. It can easily be said and demonstrated that the Hebrew culture was reared up and nurtured in Canaanite culture. But to say that the Hebrews were breakaway Canaanites themselves is utterly ridiculous, and one lacks a lot of, biblical stewardship, especially in Genesis 10, the Table of Nations, to come to that conclusion. So at any rate, that's all I have for today. I hope this suffices a redo that kind of maybe reinforces the previous video, and I will try to talk more in detail about the similarities of Canaanite and Hebrew culture, the Canaanite language and the Hebrew language in forthcoming videos. Again, if anything I've said is upsetting to you, as always, I say next time, bring a life jacket. Have a good day.